Welcome to those of you who are starting to join today's session. We'll get started here in about 5 minutes. Thank you.
Hey, morning, everyone. Who has control of the slides? Anyone know?
Welcome to those of you who are joined or have joined. We're going to get started here in just about another minute or so. So last call, and then we'll get started. All right, everybody, welcome to today's session. We're going to have some introduction by Mac here. We don't have any slides for him today. He's just going to go ahead and, oh, we do have slides, actually. Let me go ahead and get those loaded here real fast. All right, everybody, sorry about that. We're going to go ahead and get started now. Looks like we have a pretty good group together. And before I introduce myself, I actually want to introduce somebody from your side of the world, Mac McIntosh. So Mac, if you want to go ahead and talk real fast and welcome the group, and then we'll get going.
Hey, thanks, Josh, and hello, everyone. So just closing the door there. I'm based in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm the Director of Solution Engineering for Sumo Logic across APAC. And we have a couple of the team here in Matt and James who are here to support the session today. We're really excited you're here joining the Cert Jams today, and hopefully you'll come back tomorrow for the security side of the Cert Jams as well. Experience has shown these Cert Jams are incredibly impactful, really high impact use of your time, going to help you understand and be a lot more confident and capable, particularly around building and being able to create more complex queries and get greater value out of the Sumo Logic capabilities here. We've got a whole host of people from multiple different companies and different regions across Australia and New Zealand. We're really excited to have Josh lead the sessions. He's been doing this for quite a while, and just has tremendous experience. The other thing I wanted to say is drop in questions in the chat. Matt and James here to help as we go along. The more you ask, the more you'll get out of it, and then at the end, obviously, the chance to take the certifications, and we have a program, and I'll drop the link into the chat for you to be able to register to claim a $15 Uber Eats voucher, just a simple token of our appreciation of you being here, and to get that, all you need to do is attend and pass the certification. With that, I'll hand back to Josh and wish you a great couple of hours today, and I look forward to seeing you back tomorrow.
Cool, thanks, Mac. I forgot to introduce myself, although Mac did it for me, but my name is Josh Brothheim. You might detect by the accent or lack of one, I am not in the APAC area. I actually am based out of the United States in Portland, Oregon. So it's if we're doing a little time traveling here, I am in yesterday night. So thank you for attending. Also, we have James and Matt who are going to be assisting on the chat side of things. So as Mac mentioned, we want this to be interactive. We want you to participate, and we want you to learn something and have a little fun. So if there's any questions, post them in the chat, ideally about what the topics we're talking about. But even if they're not, if you have something on the top of your mind and you want to get it answered, now's the time to do it. So please utilize that chat. Let's go ahead and get started here. I have a couple slides to kind of set the table, and let's start to describe what we'll be doing today. So here's an agenda that's pretty accurate. Yeah, it's pretty accurate. We're going to start with an overview of Sumo Logic, who we are, what we do, why it's helpful for you, yay Sumo. And then I'm going to do a demo that's going to highlight monitoring and troubleshooting that I think will resonate with you. I think you'll understand it quite simply and see the value of how Sumo can help the situation that we're going to represent. And then we're going to do some labs. We're really going to be jumping into the system and doing labs today because I want you to get your hands dirty. We have accounts that we're going to share. We'll get into that a little bit later. And we'll go ahead and we'll log in. We'll actually start to create queries. And as it says here, search for analyzed data and et cetera. You can kind of read the slide, but that will be, I hope you'll find fun. And then we'll take that exam. So as Mac mentioned, by attending today and taking the exam is free for you, free for your organization. I'll talk about the exam a little bit more detail later, but it's a free opportunity for you to take this exam, pass it, and you will pass it. I can kind of guarantee that. And we'll talk, like I said, talk about those details later, but you'll walk away today both learning something and having a certificate in something, which is helpful in the job market, as well as, of course, helpful as just learning a new skill. So that's the plan for today. As alluded to, and I'll go ahead and put this link in the chat now, although probably makes more sense for me to do it later, but since I'm here, I'll do it now, is that Uber Eats voucher. So to motivate you, to reward you, to bribe you, whatever kind of word you want to use, we want you to get some food. So by taking the exam later today and passing it, and then sending that certificate to us using this link, and like I said, I'll give this link. Actually, I meant to paste it in. There we go. Paste it in the chat now, but I'll paste it in later. Send that to us, and we'll send you that $15 Uber Eats voucher. We're doing class today. We're going to be doing 2 classes tomorrow. That's a total of 3 classes, and you're welcome to get 3 vouchers. So we want to get you some food. In the past, we used to do these physically in person, and used to enjoy it. One of the highlights of my job was being able to come down to APAC and hang out with you guys. Can't do that right now, hopefully eventually, but in the meantime, since we can't be there and feed you live, we've, like I said, given you some food. So we think it's a good motivational technique. All right, let's go with some content now. So going to start talking about Sumo Logic, particularly or specifically the continuous intelligence platform. There's other aspects of Sumo, and we're just not going to be covering them today. We'll be covering them actually tomorrow, but today we're not limiting ourselves, but just going over a subset of Sumo, and that is that SIP, or continuous intelligence platform, as we refer to it. Now, how can Sumo Logic help you? Well, up on the top of the screen, I have 4 different panels, use cases, situations, however you really want to think about it, where Sumo helps. So for example, operational intelligence, understanding, are you meeting your MTTI and MTTR goals? Are things up and running properly? That all can be viewed through Sumo Logic. You can also use Sumo for security intelligence. Where are people going? What sites are they accessing? Is somebody logging in from multiple places at the same time? Should they be doing that? Things like that, Sumo can help you with. Sumo can help you with business intelligence. So understanding from a business intelligence side of things, how many widgets are you selling? Where are you selling them the most popular? How many people are visiting your website? How many are then ordering, and things of that nature. And then global intelligence, starting to be able to discover how you and your organization is doing kind of on a worldwide basis. And this is just different slices or views of Sumo Logic, and we'll talk about this kind of views shortly. Now, how do you get Sumo Logic to help you? Well, the slide didn't line up exactly right. There we go, it's a little weird. But your data is going to be important. Without having access to your data, Sumo Logic can't really do much. It needs data to perform. Now, what data does it need? Well, any data is really helpful. So you might have a variety of data that you want to utilize within Sumo. Maybe it's generated by your apps. Maybe you want to utilize data that's generated by your cloud systems, your microservices, SaaS, other third parties. Those can all be utilized within Sumo Logic. Now, how does Sumo Logic help you? Well, using our analytics, you're going to start to be able to take that data and slice and dice it, if you will. Sumo Logic has multi-tenancy that's scalable, it's elastic. We have APIs, although we don't really go over the APIs today. We have advanced analytics, which we'll actually focus on a lot more tomorrow. Same with security and monitoring. But these are all components of Sumo Logic that can be helpful. On the right-hand side of the screen, we're showing our attestations and certification, maybe a little US-based or biased, but we have international ones as well, but showing the fact that we do take security seriously. So we have our HIPAA, our FedRAMP, actually, those are more US-based, PCI, et cetera. So those, while you might not care that we have our certifications, somebody in your organization probably does, and it's important to them to know that. And so just as a reminder, we take security seriously. Now, finally, who can benefit from Sumo? Well, everybody can, yay. So not just a specific group, but if you're in DevOps, if you're in engineering, if you're part of customer success, if you're a data scientist, you can get value from Sumo Logic, and we're going to experience some of that today and a lot more of it tomorrow. Today is going to be the fundamentals, which is the basics of Sumo. Tomorrow we'll get more advanced and start to get into the security and cloud SIM and other kind of more fun parts of the system. But for now, this is a good, quick understanding. All right, what I want to do now is I want to do a demo. So let me go ahead and start my demo. Just give me 30 seconds here. All right. Here it is. Okay, 2 more seconds. Here. All right, close enough. All right, so what I want you to do is imagine Actually, let me set the scenario for you before I show you the alert. I'm starting to get a little ahead of myself. So what we want to do is we want to run through a scenario. And the scenario that I want you to utilize today is, imagine we have a company called Travel Logic. Remember, we're Sumo Logic, but today we have a fictitious company called Travel Logic. And while the company is fictitious, we're going to envision that it is a production organization. It's a production environment. And this Travel Logic is an organization that allows you to book vacations and hotels and holidays. So you can go ahead and book your airfare, you can book your hotel, you can book your car rentals. And I'm sure we've used sites like that before. And like I said, imagine this site is production. We're currently booking people and we get revenue every time they book a hotel, and they get a happy vacation and a happy holiday, and business is okay. Things are going pretty good. And that's how we make our money. Now, I work at Travel Logic, and doing so, I need to monitor Travel Logic. And what I have here is an alert that's being sent to me. It could be sent to my email. It can be sent many different ways. But in this case, I'm utilizing webhooks and using specifically Slack. And what I have here is a Sumo Logic alert gateway response time outlier. Now, hopefully I know what this gateway response time outlier means. The system's alerting me of something. But even if I don't, the system is alerting me of something. So even if I have no idea what this is, the system is letting me know, hey, something needs your attention. And we'll discuss in a few moments how it knows that it needs my attention, but let's get there. So I'm getting this alert. And now I'm envisioning about the same time I get this alert, my manager calls me and she says, hey, Josh, I hear people are having problems checking out of Travel Logic. And if they can't check out, that means they can't book their hotels and they get a bad customer service experience. We don't get revenue because they can't book, and this is a bad situation. And it's my job now to figure out what's going on and how to fix it. So how do I do that? I have basically two pieces of information. I have a gateway response time outlier alert, and I have essentially secondhand information from my manager saying, hey, check this thing out. So what I'm going to do, and let me just swap this real fast, is, here we go. I just pop these open. There we go. All right. So what I have here are some dashboards. Maybe I created them. Maybe somebody in my organization created them. I'm going to show you an easy way that Sumo Logic can create them. But regardless, these dashboard panels exist. And what they're showing us is information about our organization. They're showing us information about Travel Logic, specifically Prod 09, which is what the Slack message was alluding to. We have a couple different servers that we use for testing or for training. And what I'm looking at is an operational overview. Now, hopefully I know what this chart means, or these dashboards mean, if it's my job to look at them. But even if I don't, what I've created is a very simplistic color scheme of green good, red bad. So I see these things here. I see reporting nodes right here. It's green. Yay, that's probably good. I see load balancer. That's red. That's probably not good. I see VPC networks. That's green. That's good, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what I want to focus on is this checkout service. Remember, my manager said people are having problems checking out of Travel Logic. And what I see right here are errors. I see over the last 60 minutes, there's been 6,000 errors in the checkout service. Well, that's probably relevant, may not be, but let's go, kind of dig down that rabbit hole. So what I'm going to do is double click on this guy to open another dashboard that I've created. Now, the times here are Pacific US based, so just kind of live with it for right now. When we do the labs, it will have local time, but from now it's just, these are local to me, but for the demo, it doesn't really matter either way. And so what I will have are a bunch of different panels that I've created or somebody else has created in my organization, kind of vague on that. Like I said, we'll show you how to create these quite easily throughout the day. But let's take a look at these. What are they showing me? So here's my first one that's showing me bookings. What it's showing me is over the last 60 minutes, the amount of successful bookings and the amount of failed bookings. So if I go back about an hour, right now it's about 4:15 local time. If I go to about 3:30, everything was green, or virtually everything was green. Let me take that back. There were a lot of greens, meaning a lot of successes. So people are checking out, happy bookers, happy, happy, happy. There are some failures down here, but only a couple. Now, what I'm seeing at about 3:55 or so, 3:54 local time, is I'm seeing a decrease in this green. My successful bookings are dropping. Well, that might just happen. But concurrently at the same exact time, I'm seeing my fails go up. So something is telling me at about this time of 354 or so, something is creating a lot of failed checkouts. Bit of an assumption, but that's the assumption I'm going to kind of go with because that seems to be what this data is representing to me. Now let's look at some of these other panels. Right here, I have errors over the last 7 days for the last 60 minutes. So what this is showing me is errors that occurred today over the last 60 minutes, errors that occurred 2 days ago over the last 60 minutes. So about 3:15 to 4:15 on today, Monday afternoon, then Saturday afternoon, and then Thursday afternoon. And so what this is showing me is normally at about 3:15 or 3:20 or 3:30 local time, there are some errors. It's not that there are no errors, but there are some, but it's a very low amount. And then when I'm seeing it once again about 3:55, 3:54 is I'm seeing this spike in errors. And so this is telling me, well, errors are sort of normal, a spike is not. If I had this same spike yesterday and 2 days ago and 4 days ago, then it might just be this spike is automatically generated and, we just get a lot of errors and, we just, deal with it. But in this case, this is telling me this is a bit of an abnormality. All right, a couple more charts here. Let's do this one real fast. This is errors by node. And so what we can see here, and we'll talk about these in much more detail, well, not much more, but a little more detail later, is a couple of nodes are producing errors. And if I put my mouse over them, I see the source name of prod09.travel-checkout is producing a lot of these errors. And so once again, this is more kind of confirmation confirmation that a lot of errors are being associated with the checkout service. Still don't know what's causing them, but more information, the more information we get, the better. All right. Now here, this gateway latency, this is actually referencing that outlier alert that I referenced in my Slack message. What we're seeing here is gateway latency. And for this example, I want you to focus on from 3:30 to the right. I want you to just ignore this little bubble here. This is lab data or training data, so it replicates itself. And so we're seeing the front and the back end of the same issue. But in this case, I just want to look at the front end of it. So what is this telling me? What this is showing me is gateway latency. And what this is showing me is what the gateway latency is and what the system considers normal. So let's talk about that. Now with gateway latency, you're always going to have latency. I think just a physical property of traffic and networking is latency. I don't think you can ever have 0.0000 latency. There's always going to be some latency. But there's going to be good latency and bad latency, levels of latency. When you go to a website and you wait 2 seconds, that might be okay. You go to a website and you wait 20 seconds, that's longer and that's probably more annoying. But so there's different levels of good and bad. What is occurring here is the system is figuring out what is good and bad or what is normal. So how do we read this? So I'm going to go to 3:30 and what I see is the processing milliseconds. And the processing milliseconds is representing at that moment in time, the latency was 400 milliseconds, essentially a fourth of a second. And the system is saying below that with the threshold, the system is saying, I consider any latency between 401.32 and 401.70 to be considered normal. The actual during that time period is 401.55, and so that's considered normal or acceptable. We go fast forward a little bit in time to 3:41. The threshold has changed a touch, still about the same, 401.29 to 401.66. The actual is 401.49, so that's in that range, and so that's considered good, acceptable, normal, whatever you want to refer to it. What I see here, let me get my mouse out of the way first, is at about 4 o'clock or 3:55, once again, I see a spike and I see a pink triangle. And the pink triangle is representing the outlier. The pink triangle is the system letting me know, hey, this is not normal. The system was expecting between 401.33 and 401.67, kind of that similar range that it's been expecting all along. But it found 939, almost a full second of latency, almost twice as much as what's considered normal. And so the system is letting us know, hey, this is weird. What's happening after it is this cloud This brown kind of bubble is representing now what the system thinks the upper and the lower limits might be based on this outlier, this abnormality. And so it's adjusting its range, and then it starts to right fix it and adjust back to normal, and then we're back to normal. So what I wanted to point out here was this example, or this issue. Once again, this is also happening at that same time, about 355, 356. So at 355, we're seeing a bunch of errors or failed bookings. We're seeing a bunch of errors, and we're seeing latency. Well, that's a lot of bad stuff going on, but we still haven't figured out what caused it. So let's continue with that situation. This last chart here, last for right now at least, is CPU and total memory. And once again, if we look at this chart in earlier times, there's CPU and memory usage. 330, the lines are, pretty level. They're low, not using much memory or much CPU. And remember, we were booking, so things were good at 330. At 340, things were good previously. But what we see once again at about 354, 355 is this spike in utilization of CPU and total memory. Well, that's also when we had a spike in latency. It's also when we had a spike in errors. Something must be occurring around 355 or so. Now let's start to dig into that. What I'm going to do is click on this graph or chart, and I'm going to expand it, or it's automatically going to expand out for me. And it's going to show me two different things at the same time. Actually, it's showing me a lot more than just two things, but what I'm interested in are two things. The first thing that I'm interested in is this portion right here, where we're seeing it go high, representing the fact that there's a spike in CPUs, a spike, excuse me, in CPU or memory usage. At the same time, what we're also asking the system to do, and to look at that CPU and memory, we're looking at metrics. Now, what we're also doing with Sumo is we're using logs at the same time. And what we're doing with the logs is we're saying, look at the prod 09 travel checkout logs. So look at those logs that are relevant. In those logs, look for the word error or exception. And when the system finds that word or string of error or exception, it's going to let me know. And the way it's going to let me know is it's going to show me at the very top of the screen how many messages in a 1 minute time period have the word error or exception. So let's back up a little bit. So if we go to 330, for example, there are no errors or exceptions up here. Well, remember at 330, things were going good, and so that would make sense. 345. If I go to 350, and more specifically 354, 355, or actually in this case 356, I see here at this 1 minute period, when CPU was high, when gateway latency was high, and other things were messed up, I see a bunch of errors. What I'm going to do now is choose this 1 minute time period, because I want to start to look at those errors. I want to start to look at those logs, because those logs should or may and should give me an indication of what's gone wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and click on one of these. Shift click, actually, more specifically. And now I'm going to be brought into the logs interface. Now within this interface, the system is now going to show me those errors that were occurring. So for this example, in this 1 minute time period, there are 424 errors. And now I see all those errors right here. Here's an error, here's an error, here's an error, here's an error, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is helpful to see these errors. These errors might give me an indication of what went wrong. It might not, but I see them through here. And if I do look at them, they do give me a little bit of an indication of what might have gone wrong here. But I want a better view of what's taking place. I don't just want to see some errors. What I want to see is a better scope. I want to see a time period where things were good as well as bad. And what I want to do is try and catch that transition from bad to good, or excuse me, from good to bad, because then I can do something with that. And so that's what I want to try and find or locate now. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify my query in a few different ways. The first way is I'm going to say, let's look at the last 60 minutes of data. Let's not look just at 1 minute where things were bad. Let's look at last 60 minutes, because we know things were good as well as bad during that period of time. And so let's get a wider scope of information. The other thing I want to do here is I want to remove this string of text. I don't want to just look for errors or exceptions. I want to look for everything. And so what I want to do is now say, show me all my checkout logs over the last 60 minutes. When I run that, I get my results. So I get 27,000 results. Each page has 25 results, and so I get 1,000 pages. Now, within each message is a log message of what took place for that moment in time. So here, for example, is a credit payment occurring. Here's another credit payment. Now, there's another. There's a bunch of them. There's a bunch of stuff in here. What I want to do is I don't want to look at all the stuff. I don't want to look through 1,100 pages. What I want to do is I want to start to reduce my data down into a way that's going to be helpful to me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a feature that we call log reduce. I'm going to just click on this button called log reduce. And when I do, the system is going to take those 25,000 log messages or so and look for patterns within each log message and group the messages together based on those patterns. And so it's working right now. It will take another 20, 30 seconds at the most. And so it's now starting to aggregate, calculate and aggregate those counts. So I'm just going to let it finish up. It's just about done. So what are we seeing here? So let's look at the first line. And the first line is still going. There we go. Now it's done. So the first line shows a count of 11,000. What that means is there were 11,000 messages that followed this pattern. Now, what is this pattern representing? Well, this pattern is part of just a normal checkout process. We see the function name of a charge. We see the transaction ID. Remember, we're looking at a period of time where things were good as well as bad. And so we'd expect to see some good stuff, and these are all good. If we look at the next line where there's 4,500 log messages of this type, once again, these are good messages, part of the processing cart, just normal things we'd expect to see. This next message, there were 3,000 of these errors. Well, that's not good, but it's good that we're identifying that error. And so on and so forth. Another one that I want to point out just of errors is this error SSL routine, SSL3 get server certificate verify failed. So once again, we're just seeing these errors that occurred. We're seeing errors and good things that have happened 11,000 times, 900 times. But what I want to do now is I want to modify my search a little bit. I don't want to look for those things that happen most frequently. Instead, what I want to do is I'm trying to find essentially a needle in a haystack. So I want to look for those things that have happened least frequently or less frequently. And to do so, what I'm going to do is very simply just take my count column and just flip it around. Rather than look at from low to high, look from high to low. And so what I'm now being presented with are messages that are fairly unique. And so now what I want to do, or what I think I want to do, is look for that unique message to find out what caused all these issues. And so that's my kind of hypothesis. And so what I want to do is show you a specific log message. Let me see if I can find it. Here it is. This line message right here, the one I have a check next to, explains everything. Now, what does it explain? What does this line say? Info, boot, Travelogic app starting cluster. So this is Travelogic starting up essentially. It's my cluster of Prado 9, which is what I'm using. And it's my service of checkout, which is what was having the issues. Now look at this. What version of code is being loaded? Version 1.14 dev. Well, why is development code being loaded into a production environment? Oh, somebody made a mistake and ingested or promoted the wrong version of code. And as a result, it messed up the server certificates and messed up kind of everything else and kind of yada, yada, yada. People couldn't check out. And so that's kind of the reveal here. And what I've even done, and I don't think you noticed because I didn't point it out, but what I've done on my operational overview is I actually created a little column here, a little chart here that shows me what version of code is being pushed out most frequently, or most recently, rather, excuse me. And so I can now use this and say, hey, why was development code pushed to a production environment? Hey, Bob must have messed up or what have you. All right, so let me go back to my slides to discuss what we just showed you. So the demo was representing monitoring and troubleshooting. And so what we started off with were those alerts. Being alerted through Slack, and we could have been alerted through emails and other webhooks and really many other mechanisms we can be alerted for. Actually, you see a bunch of them right here, PagerDuty, et cetera. We had the dashboard. You could imagine that on a big screen in a command center and somebody walking by, even if they don't know what's going on. If everything is green, hey, good job, guys. If things are red, well, somebody needs to be working on it. And somebody, can very simplistically understand what's going on or not going on. We used metrics to identify what was going on or not going on. And so what was happening was that CPU spike, that gateway latency, those errors, those were all metrics. And then we used the logs to identify why it was happening. And so that's where we used the log reduce and got into the logs and found that unique log message that said somebody's essentially promoting the wrong type of code. And that's how we were able to kind of figure out what was going on. Excuse me. All right. Sumo Logic data flow, very simple, well, not super simple chart, but pretty simple, and going to give you a good understanding of how Sumo works. And the first step is data collection. And I mentioned earlier, in order for Sumo to work, your data is required. You can't really do much to it without, or you can't do much with it without, collecting it. So I'll talk about collection a little bit, I guess, right now, and I have one other slide. Actually, we'll look at collection when we do the labs as well. But collection is essentially the idea of collecting and ingesting and bringing your data in, bringing it from apps, bringing it from third parties, from cloud into Sumo Logic. Now, once your data is in there, good job. That's one part of the solution. But the next is searching and analyzing your data, because by default, your data is just kind of sitting there, kind of hanging out, waiting for instructions. And that's where searching and analyzing comes in, utilizing operators in the query language to start to slice and dice your data and get back what you want from it. Using charts to represent your data. Maybe looking at a bunch of log messages is helpful. Maybe looking at a pie chart is more helpful, and you have that option. And then visualizing and monitoring, as alluded to earlier, those alerts and dashboards, so that you can at a glance see that everything is green or everything is red. You can get an alert and a notification somewhat, not ironically, but staying out of Sumo Logic. So you don't have to sit in the system all day running queries and dashboards. You can have it generate an alert and send you a Slack or an email letting you know, hey, this is wrong, or this is weird, or this is good. It doesn't always have to be bad stuff. And throughout today's class, we're going to go through each part of this. Now, data collection is part of our administration class, and I can talk 3 hours, actually more than 3 hours, about collection. For today, we're going to talk about probably another slide or two, and that will be about it. But certainly, if collection is relevant to you and you want to understand that administration, that class is appropriate for you. Searching and analyzing, we're going to do, once again, kind of a mini version today. I could also do another 3 hours on that. Actually, I can do probably do 10 hours on operators. And so if you're interested in that, well, like I said, we'll do a basic today, but our search mastery class is helpful for that. Also, the class tomorrow, the cloud security analytics class, will utilize a bunch of operators. So if you want to learn more about operators, just stay with us for the next 2 days. And then visualizing and monitoring, we'll create some dashboards today, and we'll create an alert today as well. Yeah, we'll do both of those today. So, by the end of the day, you'll get an experience with each one of these steps. Which is going to be very helpful. All right, a couple more slides before we get into the labs. This is a slide. This is the slide I have about collectors. It's very overwhelming. Don't worry about every little detail on this. Don't worry about any of the details on it. But let me just speak to it at a higher level. So what I'm trying to represent here at the very top of the screen is the Sumo Logic cloud. So that's where all the data needs to reside. That's where our servers are, and that's where Sumo Logic is. And your job is to get your data into Sumo Logic. Now, where your data resides prior to Sumo Logic is going to influence a little bit of how you get your data into Sumo Logic. The same theory applies. It's coming to Sumo Logic, but it depends where the data is in the first place. Let me expand on that because that was a pretty poor explanation. What I'm showing on here are the left-hand side of the screen and the right-hand side of the screen are different technologies. On the right-hand side of the screen, I'm showing newer technologies that some have been around for a while, but cloud-based technologies essentially. Azure, AWS, GCP, and many others. Now, those environments do not have physical hardware. I guess we could debate that, but in your realm, they're cloud-based. They don't have a physical environment. And in order for you to bring that data into Sumo Logic, you would essentially go into our system and say, hey, this is where my data is. This is my AWS password. Go grab my data. It's a lot more secure than that, but that's the gist of it. On the left-hand side of the screen, we have older technologies, things that might be on bare metal, sitting in closets, generating logs or metrics. So we might have things sitting behind firewalls, generating syslog data or remote files. Now that data also needs to be brought into Sumo Logic. In those cases, you can actually install an agent that we call collector that will bring that data into Sumo Logic. The end result is the same. Data gets into Sumo, but once again, it just depends where the data is in the first place. And I'm going to kind of leave it at that. If you want more information on that, which you probably do, our administration class is perfect for that. But for today, that's kind of all you really know. So I don't want to go too much deeper than that. The other thing I want to allude to for today is metadata. Metadata itself is not a unique to Sumo Logic. We didn't invent it. We don't claim to own it, but we utilize it, and many other organizations do. And what metadata is on a higher level are tags that get added to stuff. And in this case, the stuff is going to be log messages. So when the log messages are collected, these tags get applied automatically to your data. And the intention of these tags is to make it easier for you to locate your data, or somebody in your organization to locate your data. Because with the collectors, you could have one collector, you could have 10 collectors. We have some customers that have 10,000 collectors and more, and there's no wrong or right way to do it. You might have a lot of collectors. And so with this mechanism of metadata, specifically a source category, you or an administrator can start to label this data so that when you want to identify it, it becomes easier to identify. So for example, the source category that you see on the bottom is a feature we're going to use a lot today. And we're going to use the example a lot of source categories equals lab/Apache/access. Now, even if you know nothing about Sumo Logic, which at this point you may not, even if you know nothing about lab Apache access data or source category data, this name is giving you an indication of the data type. It's telling you it's lab data. It's not training data. It's not production data. It's not development data. It's lab data. It's lab Apache data. It's not lab O365 data. It's not lab AWS data. It's not production Apache data. It's lab Apache data. And specifically, it's lab Apache access data. There's also lab Apache error data, which is another source category. And we'll actually use that one. Yeah, we'll use that. We may use that one later today. So just want you to understand that kind of theory of, theory of source categories. All right, let's start doing some labs. So let me go ahead and put these credentials into the chat. Matt and James are here to help us with them. And so if you probably have never used credentials with us before, so this will be the first time. These credentials are training credentials. We don't want you using your own production account because you don't have the lab data in there. And so we want to play with fake data, and this is how we give you access to it. So to get access to the fake data, you're going to go to service.sumologic.com. Might be a little bit different than what you normally go to, but for today, it's going to be service.sumologic.com. The email I want you to use is training plus analyst number. And I want you to select the 3-digit number. So maybe you want to be training plus analyst 007 at sumologic.com. Maybe you want to be training plus analyst 123 at sumologic.com. Training plus analyst 9482713. Pick a 3-digit number. And then we're going to log in with that password of security 22 exclamation point. So capital SECURITY 22 exclamation point. So let's go ahead and get logged in. Once you get logged in, if you can go ahead and put the number, as Matt's asking, go ahead and post that number. If there's overlap, it's actually okay. We're a pretty small group, and for today, it's fine. So, but that way it's kind of confirmation that you've logged in. If you need help getting logged in, of course, holler. That's why we're here. It'll probably be a typo, but that's okay. We'll still help you with it. These credentials you can use after today. We'll use them tomorrow. You don't have to memorize them for tomorrow, but they'll be good for the rest of the month. So if you want to come in later and play around or do stuff in Sumo, this is how you can do so. I'm going to go ahead and log in myself because I want to use the same account as you. I don't want to use that other account I was using. If you can't log in, of course, like I said, please help. If you don't want to log in, that's okay too. Feel free to sit back and just kind of watch. I'm going to do the labs myself, so you'll still get the experience of them. So I'm going to log in with training plus analyst. I always use 234. I don't think anybody's using that. If somebody is, it doesn't matter. And password security 22 exclamation point. All right. So hopefully you're logged in. If you still need another second, please come in. I'll kind of slowly kind of tap dancing here just to make sure everyone's getting in. I think we're pretty good now. Now, when you log in, as I mentioned, these are training accounts and somebody else may have used it already. So if you log in and you get just not nonsense, but you just get stuff, feel free to close it. Easiest way is to go to one of the tabs and choose close all tabs. But ideally, you should be on a screen that looks pretty similar to this. It might look a little different than this if the black bar is open. But ultimately, I want you to get to a screen that's close to this. So I'm just going to kind of pause here for a second. So once again, we should be logged in. We should be in Sumo Logic. We should be on the home page, and the home page should be kind of clean. All right. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to point you to the labs. I'm going to put a link in the chat just to save us all a little bit of time. And if you're still logging in, please come in. If you can't log in, try a different number, just a different three-digit number. And what I want you to do once you log in is use the link I just sent to you. So let me go ahead and put that in. So once again, we should be logged into Sumo. We should be opening our labs, our lab guide. And yeah, those are really the two places we should be. Okay, so I think we're all together. Yeah, so let's continue. So let's jump into the hands-on lab guide. Excuse me, easy to say. So as you see here, there's 7 labs. Each lab has a lot of different parts, so we'll go through these one by one. So let's start with lab 1. So lab 1, what we want to do, login details. Let's see. Let me just go ahead and post those in there, although Matt will probably beat me to it. Let me just put those in one more time. Yeah, okay, thanks, James. All right, so once again, logged in our lab guide. Now with our lab guide, what we want to do is we want to run through a scenario that's probably pretty familiar to you because it's in the scenario you're in right now. You have access to Sumo. Where do you start? What do you do first? Well, that's what we're going to do with our lab guide, is give you some recommendations of where to start. So the first thing is signing in. And so we've all logged in, or virtually everybody's logged in. I think Matt's helping another individual or two, but we're all logged in. So good. Now, where do we go next? Well, it depends. We might know where we need to go, but in this case, we don't. New system. So let's see what data is available. As I mentioned earlier, the system relies on data that's collected for you to query it. You need to collect it first. And so what we're going to show you here is what data has been collected, what data is available. To do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the black bar. If the black bar is hidden, it's just on the far left. And we're going to go to manage data, and we're going to go to collection. When we go to manage data and we go to collection, we are now seeing all those collectors, all these collectors that have been configured by somebody in my organization to grab data. We see information about them. We see the name of them. We see the health of them. Are they up and running right now? We see the source category of them, what data they're bringing in. We see a visual representation here. So for example, with this observability data, I had this little graph showing me over the last hour, a bunch of data has come in and spiked or peaked at 3 different times, and so on and so forth. Now, in the real world, you may not have access to this collection environment or screen. This is an environment or part of the system that an administrator could say, I don't want people accessing. But we want to show it to you anyhow. So if you can use this, great. If you can't, well, at least you know what to ask for. So this is a good starting place. You log in and you can see what data is available. And like I said, we have a bunch of different, a lot of different data in here. So a lot of this is test data, a lot of this is other students, but many different sources of data. Now, what I want to do next is I want to do the same thing of showing you the data that's in the system, but this time I want to do it through a query. I want to do a log search that's actually going to show us the same thing, or virtually the same thing. So how do we do that? Well, we follow the steps. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the plus new icon. So at the top of the screen of Sumo Logic, there's going to be this plus new. And when you click it, you have many different features to use. We are only going to be going over today log search, but there's other features. Just I could do 3 hours on each thing. But in this case, let's go to new log search. Now, when we go to new log search, we now need to provide a query. What do we want to search for? Well, we're going to give you the query. We don't want you just making it up on your own. And what we have here in step 4 is that query. That's a very simple query, but simple is a good place to start. What I'm going to do is very simply copy the query and paste it into the screen. And when I'm ready, I'm going to hit enter or hit the search icon, and the query is going to run. Now, what is this query doing? What this query is doing is saying, look at all the data, specifically all the data from the last 15 minutes, and find all that data. Once you find all that data, and here's all that data, count it by source category. Counting is an operator. It's a very simple one, or very advanced as well. I guess depends on what spectrum of the scale you want to look at it on, but count is very important. And so what we're doing is we're counting by source categories. And what I now see in my results are the source categories and the count of how many messages were part of the source category. So over the last 15 minutes, the system found 338 messages that are part of labs artifactory request, 160 that are part of the squid proxy ULM, and so on and so forth. I can click on the count column to sort it from high to low or low to high. And so what I do if I click on it from high to low is I now see the majority or the largest source of data was Kubernetes data. Well, the second largest source is also Kubernetes data. The third largest source is VMware, and so on and so forth. And if we look down to, actually, I think it shows up on page 2 today. Here is Lab Apache Access data. And that's the source we're going to use. But we see all the other ones. So now we've ran a query. All right, so now let's continue. And so in this scenario, suppose, as it says right here, suppose we're interested in a log message for Apache Access. So we've now logged into the system. We've looked to see what data is there. We see there is Apache Access data, and we know that that is relevant to our job. Now, where do we go? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to, as it says here, look for a shared dashboard. Maybe somebody in my organization is familiar with Apache Access data, and maybe they've already created a query and a dashboard that does what I want to do. Maybe they've already done the work for me and I don't need to do it. Why, reinvent the wheel? So what I want to do here is I want to go into Sumo. I want to go to the library icon, so on the far right of the black bar. And the library icon is going to show me all those things that other people have shared with me. And so what I want to do is I want to look for, there's actually going to be a lot of junk in here, so I kind of have to weed through the junk a little bit, but ultimately what I want to look for is Apache Access. And where do we have you look? The Apache overview. So I go Apache Access in the far right, and then I click on this Apache overview. And now I'm viewing this data, my data, through this query that somebody in my organization has already created. So it looks like John has created this query or these dashboards for me, and I can use them. Maybe they're helpful, maybe they're not, but I'm seeing what he's done. And so I see he's created a map out of the data and done some other stuff. Now, Apache data, I've referenced a few times, but I haven't really told you what it does. And even if you don't know what it does, you probably know what it does. So what is Apache Access data? Essentially, it's web server data. When you go to a website, this is a record or a recording of your experience there. When you go to a website successfully, a recording of a status code is kept. And that status code is a 200. So when you go a website, you get a 200. Now, what status code do you think if you get to a website and the file cannot be found or the page cannot be found? It's a status code you've probably seen before. Exactly, Christopher, it's 404. And so now you know status codes, you know Apache access, and that's about as deep as we're going to go through those today, but now you know what we're looking at. And I should have probably mentioned that a moment ago. Let's see, Steven's asking, is the Apache dashboard the same as the Apache access? It isn't. And if you don't have it for right now, it's okay. I probably need to just clean up these. There's too many options in there, I think. So if you can find the one that says Apache Access, great. If not, that's okay, because we're actually going to create some of these on our own in just a moment. So if you can't find it, it's okay. You really won't be left behind. All right, so what I see now here is John's attempt, or somebody in my organization's attempt, to take this data and work with it. And like I said, maybe this is helpful, maybe it's not. Regardless, though, let's go to the next step of the labs. And the next step of the labs is using what we call an app. Now, every company refers to the idea of an app differently. And so when we refer to an app, what we mean is a query and dashboard that we or somebody at Sumo Logic has created that you can utilize for your data. So let me show you it, because that explanation was not that great. What we're going to do is we're going to go into Sumo Logic, and we're going to go to the black bar, and we're going to go to the app catalog. When I click on the app catalog, I'm going to see about 150 or so different types of data, popular ones for the most part. You can see here it's an alphabetical order list. So we have our AWS, we have it's alphabetical order, Cisco, Docker, Linux, et cetera, et cetera. And what these are very simply, like I mentioned earlier, queries and dashboards that somebody at Sumo has created, and we are taking advantage of. So let's see how we take advantage of it. So for today, we want to look at Apache data. Kind of mentioned that a few times. What I want to do here is I want to look for the Apache app. I can look for it by going down to Apache, or I can search for Apache. But regardless, I want Apache, and specifically Apache with a feather. The other ones are they're not relevant for this discussion. So what I'm saying is when I click on the Apache, I'm saying basically, give me Apache output, or output of my Apache data. And what it's about to provide to me, these are just previews, screenshots. These are not actually data yet, but it's about to provide this Apache error analyst to me, this Apache outlier analyst, trends, visitor access type. Remember, this is web server data, so we can start to see where our people are coming from, what they're using. And I want that. That's cool stuff. So how do I get that? Very simply, I'm just going to click Add Integration. When I do, I'm going to do two things here. The first is I'm going to need to give the system the source category. I need to tell the system where my Apache data is. And so I'm going to specify. Actually, so we can go ahead and do the source category, but what we want to show you how to do here, I always forget about this, is how to use a custom data filter. It's the same idea, it's just another set of metadata. So what I could do, and if you want to, you actually can do it, is I could do labs/Apache/access, but what I want to show you how to do is enter a custom data filter and then do it like that. End result is the same. Now, the other thing I want to do here before I click next is I want to modify my folder name. Remember, we're in shared accounts, and so there may already be an Apache folder saved for your account, and you can't have more than one. But what I can do is I can just add, my initials here, and I'll add my number. So I have my enter a custom data filter of web server _system equals Apache, and then I have my folder name with something I can recognize. Now I'm going to click next. It's going to take us 10 seconds. And ideally, I see success. Now I can go ahead and start to open things in here, but what I want to show you is how to go back to your personal folder, so in the black bar, and now you should have a folder that says Apache, whatever you called it. When I click on it, I now should have these other views. And so let's go to Apache Overview. Let's start with that. Now, in this case, I might not know anything about Apache data, more than what I told you of 404s are bad, 200s are good. But what I'm now seeing is a very helpful representation of what's occurring in my environment. I have a bunch of error messages. I have some critical messages. I see where users are logging in from around the world. I can go into some of these other log queries. Let's do visitor location just to keep with that theme. And now I'm seeing where users are logging in from in the world. And they should, yeah. And so I'm starting to see that. And now this could be helpful for a security use case. If I have no business in Japan, but we have people coming from Japan, is that a security issue? Should we be supporting Japanese language? There's many different kind of steps we can take with this data. This really wouldn't be security. It would be more, like I said, visitor location, web server data, but it could be used in that use case. All right, cool. And feel free to poke around in some of these other ones. So, I don't know, web server operations, kind of that same idea. Not knowing anything about Apache, you're now getting this great helpful information. And you could stick this on a dashboard or send it to somebody, and that will be the next step right now. So what do you do with this data? You've now, what do you do with this view, really, more specifically? The data is in Sumo, but what do you do with this app that you've now created? You have this helpful output. Well, what we'd encourage you to do is share it. So this information might be helpful, but what you can do is share it with somebody else. So what I can do is I can go to my folder, or I can go to the specific dashboard, click on the 3 dots and choose to share it. Do I want to share this with everybody in my company? Maybe, maybe not. Do I want to share this with just my administrators? Maybe, maybe not. You know what? In this case, I just want to share it with Stacy. She's my manager. I think she might want to, be interested in this output of data. And I'm going to include an email message. Hey, Stacy, check this out. And now I can share it. And I'm not going to, because I don't really want to annoy her right now, but I could go ahead and send that out. And so now I very simply, without knowing much about Sumo, without knowing much about Apache data, I'm now providing value to my company or my role, and that's always good. All right, let's go back to lab 1. I think we're just about done with it. Yeah, we are. So what we did there, we signed into Sumo, we looked for the source categories, or we looked through the collectors, and for source categories, we did both. We looked for the dashboards that have been shared, and then we created our own app, or create our own app as the right verbiage. All right, let's see, questions. I think, Matt and James have been on top of them. So let's go ahead and continue. We'll probably do another lab or so, and then we'll take a break, and probably after this one. All right, so lab 2. Now we're going to go into the query side of things. So we've now looked at Apache data. We know Apache data is in there. Now we want to start to query that Apache data using the query language. So how do we do that? Well, follow the steps for the most part. Once again, we're going to do a new query, or new log search, excuse me. And feel free to close all these other tabs. We're not really going to go back to them. We're not really going to go back to them, so you can close them if you want. But you should have a new tab open. Now, what we want to do here is very simply take the query that's there and copy it. So I'm going to take it, paste it, put it in it. Now, when I run it, it's running this query. And what is the query running? Well, it's looking at the source category. So it's looking specifically at Lab Apache Access data. It's not pulling O365 data. It's not pulling AWS data. It's not pulling production Apache data. I'm very specifically saying, look for this set of data. I'm specifically saying, look for this set of data in a 15-minute window, the last 15 minutes. And that's going to be the default time period. Now you can modify that. And for this example, we want you to choose or select the last 60 minutes, but by default, it will be the last 15. Now I'm going to go ahead and search again, just because I modified my time period. And now I'm also here looking for the keyword of get. What I'm saying is look for my Apache logs And within those logs, look for this string, these 3 letters. When you find messages from this time period of the Apache Access data set that have the word get, show me the results. And so what I see are 30,000 results. Your number might be a little bit higher or lower than mine. When I click start, my 60-minute window is defined as such. If you click start even a second later, your window is a little bit different than mine. And so it's not important that your numbers match 1-to-1, but that you understand why they may not. And so that's why they may not. For today, it doesn't matter either way. Let me go back to my lab. So as mentioned, we've now started to retrieve these messages. Now what we want to do is we want to parse these messages. Now, what does parsing mean? Parsing is the ability or the functionality of pulling apart the message and defining different portions of it. Let's look at that because that explanation was not that great. So here is a log message. Here's another one. Here's another one. These log messages have valuable information in them. I don't think I have to sell you on the value of log messages. You're kind of bought in on that already. You know log messages are important. But how are they important? Well, they have data in there that's helpful for us. So in this first log message, what data do we see in here that might be helpful to us? And if you want to answer out loud, cool. If not. So what do we see in here that might be interesting to us? Well, let's start right here. At the front of each log message is an IP address. I recognize this as an IP address. I hope you recognize this as an IP address. If you don't, it is an IP address, but those are at the beginning of each message. So that's something that's valuable in these log messages. What else is valuable in here? Well, here's the date and time. So when somebody came to our website, this is where they came from, and this is the time they did it at. We see the website they were coming from. So this is the referrer website. Where were they trying to get, where did they come from? They were coming from Google. And now the other thing of interest, there's more, but at least for right now, is this number right here, the status code, which is representing the success or failure of accessing that website. A 200 means somebody accessed it successfully. So there's other stuff in here as well. But what we want to do with parsing is we now want to pull that out. We want the system to identify that. How do we start to tell the system to look at this as a status code? Well, that's what parsing does. So let's go through it. Now, there's many ways to parse your data. There's, well, 4, 5, actually probably even more than that. We're going to show you one way. The way we're showing you is, it's not the most difficult. It's actually the easiest because you're using the UI, but there are other ways that may be better. But for this example, I wanted to show kind of the longer way. I think it's the example just is more helpful. So let's go ahead and start to parse our data. What we're going to do here is we're going to highlight a portion of the message. It doesn't matter which message we choose, the first, the second, the third, the 100th. But what we want to do is we want to highlight the word get and that first quote before the word get. And then we want to highlight all the text through that URL, that referrer that I was just mentioning. So let's do it. I'm going to choose a log message. I'm going to highlight the quote in get and highlight on through this URL. If I did not highlight the portion I just did properly, I'm just going to redo it. Once I have it highlighted, I'm going to right click on that blue portion and select parse selected text. Now, what I'm going to start to do in here is I'm now going to start to tell the system what these different fields are and provide values to them. So for example, and this might not, let's see, I don't think this is the best example, but in between the word get and in between HTTP is going to be something. It might just be a slash. Hopefully it's actually more text, but whatever it is, I'm going to highlight. I'm going to click to extract this value and it's going to turn into a star. Now down below where that star is, I'm going to give that field a name. And so in this case, I'm going to call that field a URL. Next, I'm going to highlight the 3-digit number. Click to extract the value. It's going to turn into a star. And I'm going to do comma. I'm going to call it status code. Next, I'm going to highlight this 4-digit number. This 4-digit number is the size. So how many bytes were transferred when I went or when somebody went to that website, comma size. Finally, inside the quotes, I'm going to highlight that URL and going to call it refer. Referrer. Ideally, I should have 4 stars, 4 fields. If I have a mismatch, the system will not let me submit. Since I don't, I can submit. And so I'm going to click submit. What I should now get at the top of the screen on the second line is my parse statement. And what's happening here is the system is now using this pattern recognition. It's going to look at the log message. It's going to look for the word get. If it finds the word get, it's going to look for the HTTP. If it finds that, the thing in between it is going to be the URL, and so on and so forth. And so when I click start, I should now have a bunch of fields with a bunch of values. So now I have a field for refer, I have a field for size, a field for status code. And now I can say, how many status codes did I have? Out of all my status codes, what percentage were 200s? And I can start to now calculate these values. So what we did was parsing there. And so we've taken our data and sliced and diced it to recognize fields and values within that data. Once again, other ways to do this that are easier, but this is a good way for you to learn how to do it. All right, so hopefully we're together. All right, what we're going to do next is save this. So we've now created a search. We want to save it. Saving, pretty straightforward, pretty easy. Going to go to the 3 dots and choose to save it. In this case, save as. When I save as, I'm going to give it a name. By default, the system will start, just as you might have noticed, it will start giving each tab sequential numbers, search 2, search 3, search 4, etc. But I could go ahead and start to rename this. So I could call this, whatever I want, Apache parsing. And I can choose where I want to save it. And then I can save it. When I save it, now if I go to my personal folder, I should have that search in there. All right, back to the labs. So we now save that search. And that's actually the last step in here, is saving the search. Kind of a weird way to end that lab, but nevertheless, we created a query, we parsed, and we searched. All right, let's finish up lab 3, then we'll take a little break. So what we want to do in lab 3 is now continue with our query. We have our query, we have our parsed data. Just reading a question. Very good question. The question was, how do you parse the IP? Oh, sorry, too many tabs open here. So there's a couple of different ways to do that. What we could have done, let me go back here. When I run these 2 slashes, it's as if the line doesn't exist. So I'm going to start over. But what I could do is basically the same idea, is I could have highlighted a different portion of the message and said, come on. There it goes. So I could have called that IP. I'm going to do this kind of fast just to get it going. I'm going to call this whole thing, and I'm just going to call that timestamp. And I'm going to grab this little guy right here, and I'm going to call that URL. And so now when I run this, the system is looking for something. It's looking for a dash. It's looking for a dash. And it's recognizing that as an IP. Now you can also use regex in here, or regular expressions. We don't cover that right now. We cover that, will we do that tomorrow? We might play around with regular expressions tomorrow, but that's another way that you could parse the IP. Many different ways to do that. Just this is the way we're showing here. So hopefully that helps answer the question. All right, let's go back to lab 3. And so what we're doing with lab 3 is we're taking the query we already have. So if you already have your 2-line query, great. If you don't, you can steal it from here. And we're going to add another line, which is going to be count by status code. So just to make sure we're all together, we have our metadata, we have our parsing, and now we have our counting. And now when we run this, when we run our counting, we get a new tab. Before we ran this third line, we had our messages and we saw a list of messages. When we run the count line, we get aggregation. When we do math, we get aggregation, and counting is a mathematical operator. And so we're seeing the results of that math in the aggregates tab. And so what I'm now seeing is over the last 60 minutes, the majority of my data has been 200 status codes. That's good. That's what it should be. Well, I've had a bunch of 404s. That's not so good. I've had a bunch of 500s. That's not too good. But now I'm starting to see that. I'm now getting that insight. And I or somebody in my organization might be, really wanting to know how many successful connections are we having? How many are we not having? And doing something about it. So I've now aggregated my results. What I want to do next is I want to use what we call the time slice operator. To use it, I'm going to actually do 2 lines here. I'm going to add a line that says time slice 1M, and I'm going to modify my count. So let me grab those 2 lines and let me talk through them. So before I run this query, when I'm looking at the last 60 minutes, I'm looking at the last 60 minutes from, in this case, 4:15 to 5:15 local time. What if I want to look at my data a little more granularly? I want to look at it over the last 60 minutes, but instead of looking at it in a bucket of 60 minutes worth of data, I want to look at it in a 1-minute slice of data. I can do so using this time slice. So when I run the third line, I'm saying take my data and slice it into 1-minute buckets of time, and then count by the status codes as well as the time slice. And so when I run this, what I now get are 1-minute chunks of time. Now the ordering is it's not in any order by default, but I'm starting to see these 1-minute chunks of time. So for example, in line 1, what this is showing me is from 5:09 to 5:10, there was 1 503 status code. From 4:40 to 4:41, there were 11 401s. From 5:10 to 5:11, there were 308 200s, and so on and so forth. Now, at face value, this isn't that helpful. It's my data. It's a lot of it, but it's just kind of it's not in any order. It's not really visually pleasing, but it is data. What I want to do here is I want to clean this up. And the way I'm going to clean this up is using transposition or transposing. What transposing allows me to do is take my data and essentially convert it into an Excel look and feel. And you can see what it will look like in a moment down below here. So I'm going to take this line right here and add it to my code. And I can do this since my code has, I'm going to say 3 dimensions worth of data. I don't even know if I'm using that term properly. But when I say 3 dimensions, I have my status code, I have my count, and I have my time. And what I want to do is now take all that and mush it all together and get an output that's more visually pleasing. And that's what transposing is doing. And so with the transposing, I'm saying take my time slices, my 1-minute periods, put those in rows. Take my status codes and put those in columns. And at the cross intersection, like you would have in an Excel spreadsheet, it's going to put that other dimension of data, which is the count. And so now I'm starting to get something a little more helpful. Here at 4:15, I see that there were 150 200s, 25 304s, blah, blah, blah. But I'm starting to see here in the 200 column, I see first there were 152, then there were 402, then there were 340. So I see it went up, then it went down, then it went up, then it went down. And I'm now starting to kind of see that data. Now, some people can look at not raw numbers, this is aggregated data, but these numbers and start to see trends and patterns in them. Many of us can't, and I include myself in that. And so what I can do here is utilize the charting options. By default, I'm put into this tabular or table view, but maybe I want to view my data in a bar chart, a column chart, a line chart, a pie chart, an area, many different options. In this case, for this example, we're going to use the column or the line chart. You can reuse either one. They both kind of show the same thing. Different things, but similar. So the question Stephen is asking is what we're about to look at. And it's perfect timing for it. So Stephen's question is, and maybe your question is, how to remove or hide results. Now, why is he asking that? Well, I honestly don't know, but let me explain why he might. In this chart here, I see my 200s. They're represented by this dark blue line. And I see they go up and down very, very clearly. There's peaks, there's valleys. I see them. These 304s down here in this kind of purple line, I can see them. I see there's peaks and valleys. Since there's less of them, the scale is kind of smushed down, but I still see peaks and valleys. But these other values, I can't really make out due to scale. They're just, like I said, kind of smushed down. So what if I want to remove or hide results? How do I do that? Well, there's two different ways to handle this. Depends how I want to handle it. Here's one option. I can simply hide the results in my table or my chart. So I can go ahead and click on the 200 to turn it off, click on the 304 to turn it off. And now all these other values are adjusted to scale. And now I can more accurately see peaks and valleys in here. If I wanted to turn off the other 300, I can go ahead and click, come on, turn on that. And now I'm looking at just my 4s and 5s. Now, another approach to this is to do this through the query itself. And in this example, we're going to use a where statement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my query and I'm going to add one line to it. And that's this line here. And what I'm saying is grab my data where status code equals 200 or status code equals 304. And by putting those two, I'm essentially saying with the exclamation point, grab everything but these two sets of data. So now when I run this, the system's going to grab all the data, exclude those status codes, and now only display the ones I've requested. So now, as you see here, it's leaving out the 200 and the 304 from the results. So there's two ways to approach this. Do I want to leave the 200s and 304s out of my results entirely, or do I just want to hide them in my chart? And so based on the answer, you would do appropriately. So great question, Stephen. I don't know if you planted that question to because that's where I was going next, or generally asked, but perfect timing with that. Cool. All right. Cool. So now we have our chart. So why don't we take a break now? Let's do let's see, time-wise, we're doing pretty good. Yeah, we're doing pretty good on time. We'll do let's do an 8-minute break. So we'll take 8 minutes. Feel free to grab a snack, beverage, do whatever you got to do. If you want to ask a question, feel free to, I'd like for my guys to grab a snack or something as well and step away. But once we come back, we'll answer those. So we'll take an 8-minute break, come back, do those labs, take the exam, and get you guys out of here with an education and a certificate. So thanks, everybody, and talk to you all in a few moments. All right, everybody, welcome back. Hopefully you had a good little break and snack or beverage or whatever. Let's see, just looking at some of the questions. I think we're good with the questions. Stephen, let's see, is asking about the format. The format you're showing that should work. Give it a try. If it doesn't, one of our guys can help you with it, but that query looks correct. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue with our lab. So where we were is with lab 3, we were just finishing up the charts. So we should have our charts saved. And what we want to do is now jump into lab 4. So with
Hey,
lab,
Josh,
yes.
sorry to interrupt. Just before you
No.
begin that, there's been a question about day 1 and day 2 and the link for day 2. Are we using the same link for day 2 that we were using for day 1?
Let me check. I think so.
I think we might be, Henry.
Yes,
that may answer your question.
Yeah, I have the same link. So yeah, if you signed up for both days, just show up tomorrow with the same link.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. All right, cool. Okay, so let's start with lab 4. So with lab 4, what we're going to do now is we're going to take our graph and we're going to turn it into a dashboard. So at this point, we have a query that's creating a graphical output, if you will, but we want to take it and move it into that dashboard format. So we're going to go ahead and do so. So pretty easy to do so. What we're going to do is we're going to go into the query, and more specifically the chart, and we're going to click add to dashboard. Now for this example, we're going to go ahead and give the panel a name. So ideally we'd want to call it something helpful. In this case, once again, we're just playing around. Just since I have this saved, I'm going to call mine Apache status code -200-304, but you don't have to be that specific. But although actually I take that back, being specific helps because you want the person that's using this panel to know what the heck they're looking at. So being descriptive is good. And now you want to select your dashboard. Now, in this case, we are going to create, there we go. We're going to create a new dashboard because we want to create a new dashboard. If we had one we were already working with, we could add on to it. But in this case, I want to create a new dashboard because that's the whole point of this use case. So I'm going to call mine, once again, just my initials and a number. Once I did that, I'm going to click create new dashboard. Now, when I click create new dashboard, automatically it's going to create the dashboards in the new UI, which in 99% of the cases is what you're going to want to select. However, for this lab, I haven't, and yeah, it's really on me. I haven't rewritten the lab to use the new dashboard. So in this case, I want us to use the old one. You can try using the new one, but it's just not going to work. There's an issue with the, I think with my transpose, I just need to modify. So for now, we're going to select the old dashboard. Once we have that just kind of saved, we're going to click add. And when we do, what should occur is now pretty much what you see on my screen. I now have a dashboard using my dashboard name, and I now have that panel here. I also have access to it under my personal folder. And so I should have something, pretty similar to what I'm looking at right now. Now, what we can do here is we can start to add a text panel. So for example, maybe this panel is helpful, but maybe I'd prefer to add a panel and add a text panel and explain what this is. Apache info. Use this data to look for 200 or, whatever it might be. That's really not to look for, but whatever you want to put in there. And so I can start to do that. And I can move these around. Kind of has a WYSIWYG look and feel, so that maybe I want to make this chart bigger. Maybe I want to put this further, over to the left and the right, whatever I can do, I can start to modify it. The other thing I can do in here, which may not sound like a big deal, but it really is, at least for me, I think it is that color scheme. Under the 3 dots, more actions, I can toggle the theme and switch from a light theme to a dark theme. And that dark theme is just, at least for me, it's much easier on the eyes. Once I'm done editing, I click on Done Editing. And now, as I mentioned, this lab, we want to create and share a dashboard. And now to share it, we would share it the same way we did earlier. We can either go to the three, we can go, actually, it really should be sharing it from here. So we can go to the three dots over here and choose to share. And now, once again, decide who do we want to share this with, among other options. All right. Cool. So yeah. So what we want to do next is we want to modify a dashboard. So in this example, what we want to do is we want to go to the Apache overview dashboard that we created earlier when we created the web, when we created the Apache app. So ideally, I want to go to the left nav bar. I want to go to the Apache, in this case, the one that has my name on it. And I want to go to the Apache overview. And ideally get something that looks really specifically like this. All right, so hopefully you're on the screen. Now what we want to do is we want to modify the dashboard. So here's what we're going to do. Here we have our visitor location map, and we're not really going to go into the details of how this map is created. Well, I'm trying to think if we touch on it tomorrow. We don't. It's actually more of the search mastery class, but regardless, we have a map. Now, what we can do is we can modify this map's view, and that's what we want to do here. So in this case, we have a worldwide map. Great, we're a worldwide company. We want to look at worldwide data. Worldwide map makes perfect sense of why we'd use it. But let's pretend the way that we, myself, and my peers in the US might be, we're a little US centric. What if we don't care about this worldwide map? I'm US centric, I'm US based, I want to look at US data, I don't care about worldwide data. How can I modify this visitor location map for my needs? Well, that's what this lab is all about, so let's see how to do it. I'm going to go to the three dots, and I'm going to go, actually, I can use really either one, but I'm going to go to Edit. Excuse me. When I go to Edit, I'm now in that view similar to what we looked at before we created our dashboard. I have the query, I have the graph or the map or the display, and I can modify this. Now, what do I want to modify in here? Now, it's not obvious, and so I'm really going to kind of handhold here because I need to for this lab. But what we're going to use is we're going to use this query line, or this query line of where country name equals United States. And where I'm going to drop it is right here. The reason I'm dropping it right here is my order of operations are relevant in this example. What I'm doing here is I'm looking up IP addresses and looking at their geographic location using geographic data. I'm going to kind of leave it a little bit vague for now. And that's what this line of code is doing right here. And this is very in the weeds, so you don't really need to worry about the details on this. But what I'm doing here is I'm basically saying, take our IPs and look them up. And when you find those IPs, bring back regional or geographical information, latitude, longitude, country name, etc. And what I'm doing here is I'm now saying, show me only where country name equals United States. I could say, show me where it doesn't equal United States, or I could say, show me where it equals Japan, or whatever country I have data for. But now when I run this, what I should now get is my map showing me just US-centric data, because it's excluding everything else. And so the reason we wanted to show you this is for you to have the ability, well, to use the ability to take these things you might find and still go ahead and modify them for your own use. So now that I have this the way I want it, I could go ahead and update my dashboard. And now I'm not showing worldwide data, I'm just showing US-centric data. Yeah, so hopefully that was pretty straightforward. Okay, I think we're good on questions. All right, cool. So let's go on to lab 6. Lab 6 is about creating an alert. Now, let's go through this exercise. Let's go through this. I'll elaborate on what we're doing here because there's a little definition issue here. What we're about to do is we're about to create an alert. Now, in transparency, in the alert we're about to create, we're really creating more of a scheduled search versus what you would consider to be an alert. And so that's, I just want to be transparent here, just in fairness. So this, what we're about to create is on a periodic basis, the system is going to run this query and bring back the results. What we can also do, although we're not going to cover right now, is create more a traditional alert where we get notified when something is out of abnormal. I'll show you how to do that as well, just because I'll point you to where that is today, because I think it's interesting to see, but it's not the use case we're using right now. So let's go through this lab and then I'll show you the other way, like I said, to do an alert, and I think it'll just help tie things together. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to that visitor location map that we were using, and we're going to go ahead and choose to open in search. So I'm going to go back to my map, 3 dots, open in search or open in log search. And now I have my query here. Now I can modify this. I could add this to another dashboard. I could not look at it as a map. You know, I can do whatever I want to do here. But what I want to do is I want to go to save as. So what I want to do is I want to go to the 3 dots and go to save as. And we did this step earlier when we saved that query, but we're not going to save the query. We're going to go to this bottom option of schedule this search. So earlier when we saved the query, we would go in here and we'd type the query name and click save. What we can do is schedule this search. And what happens when we select schedule this search is we decide first, how frequently do we want this search to run? Do we want it to run every 15 minutes, every hour, every 2 hours, every 8 hours, on a custom cron job, whatever. Let's say I want this data every 2 hours. What's going to happen now is every 2 hours, this query is going to run. And it's going to alert me in the format that I choose. In this case, I'm going to want to request an email, and it's going to send me those results. So if I put Josh at Sumo, it would send me these results. Now in transparency, or it will send me the results, it will send me the query. It's also going to send me a histogram. So what's happening is every 2 hours, this runs and sends me the list of information. And that's what we're calling an alert here. Now, what I want to show you is what I more consider to be an alert, which is a newer feature that we have under monitors. What we can do in monitors is we can start to add what I would call more of an alert, but we can now start to alert based on certain criteria. So what I could start to say is, let's see, this is not going to be a great example, but what I could start to say is, let's see, how would I want to do this? I'm starting to go down a step I didn't really want to go too deep in, but let me see. Where's my query? Ah, here it is. So what I can start to do is I can take my query, and what I could do is I could start to create maybe a warning alert when, now in this case it's showing off count, but I could modify this, maybe when I have no results come back at all, it sends me a warning. Or if I get 2 results, I get a critical. And so I can start to use this to start to trigger based off criteria, versus what I'm showing you with the alert, which is really just the straight output of data periodically. So just wanted to show you the 2 differences. They both have their place. They're both quite useful, but I just think showing the way I just did in monitors is good. And I actually will start to, or we will start to show that soon in this class going forward. It's a better way of doing it within monitors, but you now know both ways. All right, and that finishes up lab 6. Now, lab 7 is an important lab of how to get help. So we've gone through the system today, but how can you get more help? Well, the major one I want to show you, I mean, there's many ways. Let me get back into the app. So many different ways to get help. When you go to the home icon, there's the Learn tab. So under the Learn tab is going to be some ways to get help. There's some videos in here. There's linked to cheat sheets. And I would actually, for this class, you don't need the cheat sheet, but this is going to be helpful for you. Because one question you're probably asking, and I'm going to paste this in the chat because somebody's probably going to ask it eventually, is what are the list of the operators you can use? Well, here's a list of them. Now, today we covered, I think, one of these, or two of them we use count, but there's a lot of different operators. We'll use some of these tomorrow. Also in the help is documentation. Our documentation is very good. I say that as somebody who's come from companies where documentation was considered important, but was not good. And here our documentation is good. I'm going to prove to you our documentation is good, or you're going to prove to yourself when we take the exam. So using the documentation for the exam is going to be relevant. Going to talk about that more in a few moments, but just want to kind of bring that up right now. So, just very thorough documentation. What else do we have in here? Our community. So we have the ability for you to interact with an online community. We also have a Slack channel version of this as well, but so you can ask questions of your peers, other sumos, all very helpful. Let me just go back to this guy here. Let's see, what else did I mention? Learn, questions, logging a support ticket. Oh, this customer Slack that I referenced, you can register for it right here. And so just want to show you many other ways to get help. Another way to get help, back in Sumo, is I can go to certification. Now we're going to do this together in a moment, but I'm going to show it to you real fast. Actually, yeah, I'll show it to you real fast. I'm already in. What I can do is I can go to get certified, and you will be doing this shortly. Don't do this yet, especially with the training accounts. Actually, I take that back. You can do this, just don't take the exam with the training accounts. So if you want to follow me, you can. But what I want to show you is our learning portal or training portal. Keep changing names on it. What we have in here is the ability for you to access recorded sessions. So for example, for the fundamental Cert Jam, the thing you're taking right now, I can go in here, register for free, and I now have a recording, me doing the 2 hours that you're listening to now. The slides are here, and the lab guide is here as well. And so you can access that at any time with your Sumo accounts. So let me go and pause. Let me go kind of back to my deck. We're pretty much done with slides and content. I just want to make sure. One other thing I did want to show, because the question came up. So let me just go over this quickly. Not too quickly. It's an important question. But the question was coming up a couple times of syntax, order of operations. And so I want to show that right here because it does matter. The queries build on top of one another. So what I have here is a query similar to the one we were using earlier, and a representation of syntax. Now, you don't have to have all these steps in here, but this is a thorough example. So what I'm showing at the very top is we're grabbing that metadata. We're grabbing the data, the Apache access. We're looking through those keywords. Then you want to parse that data. Provide field names to that data. Now, once those field names have fields, then you can start to say, filter it. Show me where it matches 5s or doesn't match 5s or whatever. And then you can count it. And so the order does matter. Here's another, here's I think a nice visualization as well. It's just a very simple idea of a funnel. And at the top of the funnel, you start shoving all the stuff in there. And at the bottom of the funnel is, the good stuff you want to come out, those results. And so that's what I'm trying to illustrate here is you take your metadata, you take your keywords, you put it all in. Then you start to parse your data. Many ways to parse. This is, we didn't really cover either of these today. We'll do some of these tomorrow. Then you can start to filter your data and say, show me only where this or that. You don't have to, but that's the proper operations. So I wanted to just point that out because I saw that asked about, but we'll look at it in more detail tomorrow as well. All right, let's jump into the exam. Let's talk about it. So let me find this guy here. So we're now about to take an exam. This exam is free for you, free for your organization. It consists of 30 questions. You'll have 60 minutes to take it. You will not need that much time, but it's allocated to you. So feel free to use as much time as you need. We encourage you to take the exam right now with us. If you can't because life, you can take it later, but I'd encourage you to take it now, especially Matt and James will be hanging out with you. And so if there's any questions or whatever, it's a group atmosphere. This exam is open resource. So as alluded to earlier, documentation is going to be your best friend here. This is intentionally so. We want you to, hopefully you learned something today, but after today, I want you to be able to trust that documentation. And so taking the exam with the documentation is going to help. If you don't want to use the documentation, you don't have to. It's not really proving anything to anybody but yourself, but you don't have to, of course, but we'd encourage you to, as Matt's saying, open Google, open Labs, open Matt, we're here for you. And that's always going to be the case, regardless of if it's an exam or not. Now, to take the exam, you're going to need to use your Sumo account. We don't want the training user taking the account because you wouldn't get credit for it. The training user would. So hopefully everybody in this class or this session has their own Sumo account, either probably one from your work gave you one, or you might have a personal one, but I'm assuming everybody has one. If you don't, let me know, but once again, kind of assuming everybody has their own account. Now, once you've logged in as your account, you're going to follow these steps to get to the exam. And I kind of showed them already. In fact, let me log in myself to kind of join you here. So I'm going to log out of Sumo. I am going to sign in using my professional account. And if you're ready to start the exam and know where to go, well, actually, many of you don't. You feel free to, but let me show you how to get there. So I'm going to go to Home, and I'm going to go to Certification, and I'm going to go to Get Certified. It then should take me to the training portal. Might take a moment or two. Shouldn't take too long. And if you notice here, I have more tabs than I did earlier. And that's because in my account as a general Sumo user, I have more options versus the training account is a little more bottled down. So what I want to do here is I want to become get certified. Now here, I'm going to select the exam I want to take. We have many exams in many languages. The one you're going to want to take today is fundamentals in English. If you want to take it in Japanese or Korean or Spanish, you're welcome to. I don't know why you would. I mean, if that's appropriate to you, of course, but most likely I think everyone's fundamentals English. So we're going to choose that one. And then we're going to register for free. When we register, we're going to click Start. It's just going to give us some guidelines, really the same guidelines I gave you: 30 questions, 60 minutes, open book, 75 to pass. And then you're going to click Next. When you click Next, this exam is now started. Or once this page loads. Now, once it loads, actually, when you click Start Assessment, then the time actually starts. And you'll go through and answer the questions. Now, this next step is very obvious, but I'm going to point it out nonetheless. Once you're done, you'll click Next. And you'll get your score. Hopefully you passed. Hopefully you did better than I did. Once you get your score, it's important that you click Submit here. If you do not, you will not get credit for the exam. It's a bad UI. It's not our UI, it's the testing UI, but it's really an annoying feature. But it's important that you do click Submit here. So do click Submit there. And then you'll get credit for the exam. All right. So go ahead and start the exam. I'm going to talk just a few more minutes, a few other things. So feel free to hang out as well. But if you're ready to start, you can. Let's see, for certs, is it possible to register using your personal email? So no. So what we'd encourage you to do is use your professional email. But if you ever leave that role, those certs follow you. So if you're, if you're working for an example, you're working for Microsoft today and you go to Google, use your Microsoft email address now, register, take the exams. Then when you go to Google, you would just email us and we would just move those to your new account. So you won't lose them. We like to keep them to the organization. So just easier for us, Frank. So I would take them with your professional and then we can move them from you. You can give us permission to move them. Let's see what else. All right, let me see. The other thing, maybe the most important thing today, although kind of joking, kind of not, is that reminder of bribery. So once again, when you take the exam and pass it, go ahead and click on this link. and you'll fill out the form and basically attach the certification to the form, and then we'll give you your free food. Once again, you can also do this after tomorrow and send all 3 in at the same time. But I think that just about covers it. So yeah, I think we're good. Let's see, questions. I think we're good. So once again, we're starting the exam now. We're going to take it now. If we have as many attempts we need to take it, so if we fail, we can take it again. If, as mentioned, I'd encourage you to take it right now, but if you can't, that's okay. You can take it whenever you'd like. And I hope you can join us tomorrow. So for tomorrow, we're going to be doing 2 sessions. We're going to be doing cloud security monitoring and analytics, which is it's really query language. And then we're going to be doing cloud SIM fundamentals, which is a totally different side of Sumo that we didn't even go near today, which I think you'll enjoy. A lot of labs, a lot of cool information. So that's the plan for the next 2 days. I'm going to go ahead and kind of turn it over to Matt here to proctor. Matt and James are going to hang out. I'm going to probably have dinner. But thank you again for attending. You were a fun group. You guys asked some good questions. And for tomorrow, if there's questions that carry over, let us know. So over tonight or tomorrow, over the period before when we're not together, if you think of something, bring it up tomorrow, and we can, of course, answer it either right away or during a break. All right, so thank you again. I'm going to leave this slide up. I'm going to put myself on mute. I am going to make Matt the host. And I think that's going to be about it for me. Cool, so changing the host. Great, so thank you, everybody. Matt, if you need me, I'll be on Slack. But thanks again, and we'll see you all hopefully tomorrow. I think you'll have fun tomorrow. If you enjoyed today, you'll definitely enjoy tomorrow. So see you all later, and best of luck on the exam as well.
Hi folks, it's Matt Gritt here. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'll be here for the next sort of hour. So yeah, if you need anything, feel free to reach out. So if you want to log out, you'll see in the UI, right down the bottom, you'll see that you'll have training account and then the number. There's like a little person icon in the very lower left-hand corner of the black left-hand navigation bar. If you click on that, right at the very bottom, there's something that says sign out. Cool. So yeah, if you sign into your company's account and go to the certification page, which is on the little home page sign, and then there's a get certified, and if you go through there, that will make sure it has your your particular email address for when you're doing the certification.